We are back with Ian Bremmer, president of Eurasia Group and GZERO Media. So, Ian, I want to bounce off something we were talking about just ahead of the break, and that is President Biden's first foreign trip as commander-in-chief. I think the highlight's going to be when he comes face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin. It really is a test, a major diplomatic test for the Biden administration. What do you think the tone of that meeting is going to be, and what are your expectations for it?
Well, the working level meetings between the Biden administration, Secretary Blinken and Foreign Minister Lavrov in Reykjavik were dramatically better, more civil, more engaged in substance than the same meetings that occurred between the U.S. and China in Anchorage. So if that is any indication, and it should be taken as one because this is how you prep for your first face-to-face summit, it's that I don't expect all that much. I think that this is Biden's intention to get the measure of the man in terms of Vladimir Putin in person, head of state to head of state. And I also think that the most important word that Biden has used consistently in talking about Russia is they want a more predictable relationship. Not that the Americans are happy with the status quo, but they don't want surprises. They don't want to fight, especially because they consider China accurately, in my view, to be by far the more important, the more strategic competitor and challenger for U.S. national security and foreign policy going forward. So I think that this meeting is not going to be really dramatic, even though the media, is expecting that it's going to make a lot of headlines. I think there will be an effort to clear the air in areas that the Americans are particularly unhappy with Russia, and cyber, as we've noted, is number one right there. But I also think that Biden will look for areas to cooperate on nuclear and arms agreements, for example, as well as on climate. And I think that if anything surprises us from the Putin meeting, I think it might be that it's a slightly warmer, a slightly more engaged meeting than people are expecting right now.
So, Ian, the president isn't just necessarily meeting with America's adversaries, I'll call them, but also some of our friends. And he's kicking off this meeting in the United Kingdom. Curious to know, especially given the shift between the last administration and the one that we currently have, what kind of work needs to be done with our allies, and what are the priorities do you think the administration is going to have moving forward with countries like the United Kingdom, for example? The Biden administration clearly wants to show that the transatlantic relationship is functional and that multilateralism isn't dead, that democracy isn't dead, that we want to work with democracies because the democratic model is not looking at its best right now. We saw that on January 6th in a horrible way in our own country, and also because China's authoritarian model is consolidated, robust, and not going anywhere. And it's certainly not adapting towards the United States. So I think that Biden wants to show the relationship between the U.S. and allies in terms of democracies is real, is robust, and has a future. And that America is willing to do some leadership. Not by far coming out is this announcement of 500 million U.S. vaccines to be distributed to countries all over the world. And there will be an announcement of other G7 countries participating in that as well. There'll also be tens of billions of dollars in financing to support that. That'll be the most important headline coming out of the G7. But you've also seen, in terms of movement on tax policy, some level of coordination. We'll see some of that on climate, too. It's not as if the transatlantic relationship is returning to the status quo ante. That's not true. And specifically on China, Biden's top priority, Europeans don't see eye to eye with the United States. But there is more not out of. All right, Ian, unfortunately, we're starting to. Nope, go ahead, Alexis.
Yeah, let's try. I know your audio's kind of going in and out, but Ian, I'm going to try another one with you here. President Biden this week revoked those Trump-era bans or attempts to ban those Chinese-owned apps, WeChat and TikTok. What is your feeling? I mean, it's still early on in his presidency, but do you believe that Biden is going to go softer on China? Do we know enough yet to make a determination?
No, I think they're going to be softer on Russia on balance, because, again, they want to normalize and make that relationship more predictable. I think that on China, they're actually going to go harder. I think that, and harder in part because they want to coordinate with allies, where Trump largely went it alone. And that is much more deeply problematic for the Chinese government. I mean, the U.S. is looking into investigations into the origins of COVID, and they're getting the Europeans to join in that investigation. Trump would have liked to done the investigation, but only by himself. It is true, as you mentioned, that they've just rescinded that order on TikTok, but they've replaced it with an order that's going to be broader and more systematic. I don't think the Chinese see the Biden administration as patsies on any of this stuff, not to mention the fact that the Biden team focuses much more on human rights issues like the Uyghurs than President Trump individually ever did. Look, there is a general alignment between Democrats and Republicans on China, and you see that with the legislation that's going through Senate right now oriented towards China. But the Biden administration is more systematic and considered in the way they orient that policy and more multilateral. So overall, I would suggest that this is an administration that's going to be harder line on China. And you saw that play out in Anchorage a few weeks ago. You're likely going to see that play out in the first proper summit meeting that Biden and Xi Jinping eventually have, whenever that is.
Ian, real quick, I've got about 30 seconds, but reporters have been talking to former President Trump about running again in 24. He's not denying it. He's even considering perhaps having Governor DeSantis of Florida be his running mate. Is it too early to count out Trump in 2024?
It's too early to talk about 2024. God love us. But I certainly think that the momentum in the Republican Party is overwhelmingly towards those that are aligned with Trumpian populism. It's DeSantis, it's Cotton, it's Hawley, it's Pompeo. That's the group. And so one way or the other, you're getting something that feels Trumpish.
Trump-ish. All right, we're going to leave it there. To be continued for sure. Ian Bremmer, great to see you as always.